What is up, Watch fam? I'm Christian from Theo and Harris. Happy Monday, and welcome to Rant&h. Today we're going to be talking about Phillips Auction and some of the results, and what I think about them and what they mean for the market, and maybe viewing the entire auction industry in a different perspective, maybe. So anyway, before we do so, let's do a quick wristwatch check. So what am I wearing? I'm wearing a vintage Audemars Piguet Royal Oak. This is actually the first Genta, watch that I've owned. Not the first that I've worn, but the first that I've owned. The condition is immaculate. I mean, I know that I have a thing for the Nautilus. I'm a big Nautilus fan, but this example at 36 millimeters just fits me perfectly. And while it might be a little bit out of my means, I would very much so like this for Christmas or for any sort of holiday which you just get gifts, for free. So that's it. Let's get into today's episode. The first watch that I want to talk about is a watch from the Phillips Auction. That is a watch that I hold very near and dear to my heart, and a watch that performed spectacularly in a really weird way. So the first one was a Rolex 1601, silver pipe dial, original Jubilee bracelet. It had some papers, and the condition was great. To me, if you would have asked what is this watch worth, I would have said maybe it's a $1,000 premium over a standard model. Maybe put it at $4,000, and even that might have been a little bit steep. It sold at $6,200, so that's $2,200 more than I really would have imagined it to sell for, which to me is interesting, because although I love the Datejust, I think that it's an incredible watch. I mean, it's probably the watch that I'm most passionate about, But part of the reason that I'm so passionate about it is because of its, relative affordability in the vintage Rolex market. And at $6,200, I mean, although still technically affordable, compared to Rolex models, you're entering almost a new level here, a new realm of things. So I was surprised. I really was surprised that someone bid on a watch that is readily available on the market, relatively speaking, at an auction and arguably overpaid. So that was an interesting move. But anyway, good for the 1601. Staying in the vein of watches that we actually sell here at Theo and Harris that I think way overperformed, Omega Seamaster. This actually blew me away. This example, which is truly new old stock, never worn, original box, and I believe strap and hang tag, sold at $5,600. That is a lot of money. This is a watch that otherwise would maybe be worth $1,000 if it was, in great condition, not new old stock, but great condition. So the way I see it is $1,000, in great condition, maybe $1,700, in new old stock. And I'm making this number up, but I think that that's founded. I think that's an extra 70%, a 70% premium for box and papers. So 56? I gotta say, when I saw that, I was blown away. Is it a great Seamaster? No doubt, it's beautiful. But is it a $5,600 watch? I don't think so. Going back into Rolex, we have a Submariner here, reference 1680 in yellow gold with a beautiful blue insert and what's been called a purple haze dial. This watch really surprised me with its sale price at $38,000. I've seen these sell higher. I've seen these sell, like markedly higher, somewhere in the 40s and 50s even. So for a watch that I think is not only worth more, but to me it had all the opportunity to demand way over market. So I probably would have guessed this watch would sell around $70,000 or $80,000 because of its just, objective allure. These bizarre colors. It seems like something that someone who maybe even wasn't interested in watches would get so obsessed with. This poetic kind of narrative about a watch being originally blue but turning into purple, plus it being a gold Rolex, plus it being a 1680. To me, that was a perfect storm. And yet somehow it only sold at $38,000, which of course is a ton of money. But I don't know, I was surprised by its low, turnout. Next is a Patek Philippe reference 2546, a watch that blows me away. I think that the case is in pink gold, and I believe it's made out of one piece. I mean, all the lugs and then the case itself. This watch to me is a piece of art. I think it's brilliant. I think it's brilliant. I would love it in yellow gold, which would technically be a less desirable metal, but in pink it blows you away. It has this toasted kind of patina, which I think is quite beautiful. Crazy Dauphine hands and matching markers, but what is really most amazing is that this watch is only one of the 3 of this reference in pink to hit auction. And one of the 3 was actually purchased by Patek Philippe for their museum. So for if you look at this, it's a Patek, it's a Patek Philippe in a pink It's a Patek Philippe in pink gold. It's one of three. The other one is owned by the museum itself. And to me, the design is just so unique and obscure that I was blown away by its sale price. I mean, this watch only netted 35 grand. I mean, that's like kind of like Nautilus money. And I think that this watch, although I love the Nautilus, packs way more punch. I mean, this is a true rare piece of Patek, I guess, history, and I don't think I'm being dramatic when I say that this is a really important watch. So, not that 35 grand isn't a lot of money, but when you're talking about the vintage Patek world, I think that this watch very much so underperformed. So I guess that's the second watch that I think was kind of underwhelming in their sale price. And because I love that Patek Philippe so much, I think it's the perfect segue into the next watch, which it's a value prop. I mean, really, if you're into that style, it's the Vacheron 4418. It came with its original box and certificate. The condition looks immaculate. They describe the lugs as flame lugs, and it sold for 10 grand. So, I mean, less than a third of the price of the Patek. From a house of equal, respect. I mean, it's Vacheron Constantin, so it's not like you're going from Patek to Omega. I can't say whether or not this watch is historically significant. Certainly not as much as the Patek, but still, if you're talking about quality of manufacture and design, it got to be nuts to not say that this $10,000 watch packs an extremely, almost extraordinary amount of value. So whoever picked up this one, I don't know if that's market for this watch, above market, below market, but next to the Patek, I think he did pretty damn well. The next watch that I'll go into is another Patek Philippe, reference 3700, the original Nautilus, which in and of itself is very alluring, right? I mean, it's the first reference of one of the most, important watches ever to be made. And I think that this watch is interesting for two reasons. One, because of its incredible bronze, copper, just crazy, patina dial, tropical dial, which you don't find often at all. I think I know of maybe one or two others that exist. I've seen on Instagram, but that to me is extremely alluring. Second of all, Phillips is very much so known now for condition, and I respect them for that. And I also respect them a lot for offering this watch because it's not perfect. And it's extremely honest. I can't tell from the photos whether the watch has been over polished or not. I don't think that's the case, but it's been worn. It's been beaten. To me, the dial makes sense on this watch because it seems as if the person who owned it wore it. I mean, wore it a lot, whether that was, in South America or in Florida or wherever it was exposed to an extraordinary amount of sun. The dial matches the case, and I've got to say, I find that very attractive. So props to Phillips for not only just finding the best of the best, but really the most interesting and true. I think that's kind of what they're achieving here, and with that comes just so much trust, I think. So good for you, Phillips. That's really, really cool. And of course, we could not possibly talk about this Phillips auction without mentioning the most expensive Rolex ever sold publicly. The reference 6062 with a black gloss dial and diamond indices. I mean, this watch sold for $5.1 million. And that is an astronomical amount of money. People were floored by its turnout. I was hearing estimates in the 2, 3, I don't even think I heard a $4 million estimate. Maybe they were going around, but I was hearing 3, but people bid up to 5. And I do not know who bought it, but holy shit. And I do not know who bought it, but what an interesting piece. Phillips publicized the story behind the watch, and I know that there's a lot of question behind the ownership, and it is a bit of a foggy background, but I think that Phillips has earned my trust enough to share their story without major question. So here it is. This watch was supposedly commissioned specifically by the last emperor of Vietnam. It was the only watch that he was offered by Rolex, I think on custom production, that fit the level of just garish and specialness that was good enough for him. So yes, this watch has played a very important role in horological history and its relation to politics, and I think that that's very compelling, especially to a certain kind of market of buyers there. For the watch itself, I think it's very interesting. It's not my favorite 6062. I love the reference 6062, but I think I prefer just the standard models, and frankly, they are expensive enough. So I don't think I need to go for $5 million if I'm gonna splurge in the 6062. But in all honesty, the case is polished. I mean, I have seen much better examples of this reference on the on Instagram, on the open market. So for the most expensive one ever to be sold to be a polished and a not perfect example, it's very interesting, and it gives you almost the opportunity to have insight into the buyer's mind, right? Who is the buyer that would spend $5 million almost strictly on significance and not as much so on case condition, which supposedly is a cardinal rule in vintage watch collecting. I mean, you have some of the most important collectors in the world say they would never stray from untouched. This has been touched, and it's the most expensive Rolex ever sold. So, and I think that is the perfect segue into kind of my next point, and I think the largest point in this episode, and that's one of perspective. The way this market is becoming, I mean, extremely unpredictable. The values are not necessarily represented by logic, as we've come to know it in the vintage watch industry. I mean, we just hit the tip of the iceberg here. There were watches that sold for millions upon millions of dollars today. And we think it's out of control. We think that they're unfounded and everything like that. But if you look at these luxury markets, especially at auction, what is founded? I think just the other day, a Jean-Michel Basquiat, who I've never heard of the artist before, sold for $110 million. It's a painting, which doesn't mean to demean paintings. I mean, this is a watch, so I'm not just trying to, on someone else's medium. But I think that with paintings selling for $110 million, there is no reason that this same, the Bao die, the Rolex 6062 with this special dial, isn't worth 5 or 20 or 25. To me, it's just a matter of the audience that's purchasing. When it's watch geeks, when it's people who understand the market and are trying to spend and act with precedent, based on precedent, that's one thing. But once you get a whole new list of clientele, once you get a whole new audience of people who really don't give a shit, right, about a polished case or about things that we think are so important, they just want to own something. The world changes. I mean, the game is played differently then. So who knows? This $5 million most expensive Rolex ever sold at auction might have been a steal. And that's a crazy thing to think of. But before we wrap it up, I want to give a shout out to Phillips for putting together an amazing collection. I really admired their collection of Cartier in the Phillips auction. From the Tank Guilloche. I mean, so there were a couple different models there. It's Jump Hour and the Louis, and there were a couple different ones there. There's a couple of Cintres from the 20s. I really admired that. I'm a huge Cartier fan, and they were represented. And that sounds like I'm trying to advocate for a minority group, but I'm just a big fan of Cartier, and I love to see them get some attention. And believe it or not, they sold pretty low prices. So that kind of gives me a little bit of hope to maybe get rich, and buy some $25,000, vintage Cartiers. It's not happening anytime soon, but hey, we can dream. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching my recap of the Phillips auction. It was an incredible, weekend in the watch world. And that's it. Don't forget to check out the watch shop at theoharris.com tomorrow. We are listing 5 new incredible vintage watches from Rolex, Tudor, and so many freaking more. I'm overwhelmed. You'll be able to find those watches in the link in our description below. Do not forget to subscribe, and that is it. Let's rock and roll.